Zoe Gabrielle Campos was an 18-year-old from Lubbock, Texas. She was close to her family and loved to work on cars. On the night of November 17th, 2013, Zoe was at home with her sister and a friend. After they went to bed, Zoe seemingly left to meet a guy who was introduced to her earlier that day. She was never seen again. I'm Ed Densel, and this is Unfound. If you watch the Unfound Facebook live show every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern, you know I reveal a lot more about my background, my past, than I would ever do on the episodes every Friday. Well, I don't remember if the following information has ever come up on the live show, but I'll say it right now. And yes, this is relevant to this episode's case. But I'm a teetotaler. I don't drink alcohol now and haven't for several years. In fact, I've never been drunk in my life or even had a buzz. Why? Really not sure. It's not a religious thing or anything like that. I just never got into it. I suppose it helps that I continue to remember my hatred for the taste of wine and beer and whiskey, etc., 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 when I did imbibe once in a while back in the day. I can go further to say I've never done any illegal or socially acceptable drugs either. Marijuana? Nope. Ecstasy? Never. Mushrooms? Nada. Once again, it's just not me. I don't necessarily take any huge pride in it. Truthfully, I don't think about that fact of my life much at all. However, I do feel sometimes like it's a detriment in analyzing some of these cases where drugs and alcohol are involved. Not that I ever plan to change my ways, but I can't rely on my 47 years of experience to get in the head of someone else who has done those things. So for Zoe's case, I'm going to have to rely on some of you and your experience instead. I bring this up because on the night of Zoe's disappearance, she reached out to someone she knew very well, maybe for help, for advice, for diversion, and was on the phone with this person for almost a half hour. Yet, this person cannot remember the conversation. Why? Because he was drunk, so he says. If we only knew what happened during their talk, we might be able to solve Zoe's disappearance. If we could only find somewhere in this man's mind the lost call. And now a summary of the case. This is brought to you by my friend Megan Good's site, charlieproject.org. In the months leading up to Zoe's disappearance, she had broken up with a boy her family approved of to date a guy who had much more of a turbulent background. This relationship quickly became on again, then off again. All the while, though, Zoe was taking care of her business. She worked hard and saved up enough money to buy her own car, a 1997 Lincoln. It had some damage, but using her own skills, Zoe planned to fix it. On the day of November 17th, 2013, she first went to see a longtime friend's new baby. After that, Zoe went to dinner with her sister Savannah and her children, and a friend, Jessica. They then went home to watch movies and relax. It was a normal Sunday by all accounts. Around 11:30 p.m., the others went to bed, thinking Zoe would be doing the same very shortly. The next day, Savannah and Jessica woke up to find Zoe wasn't there. In addition, they discovered Zoe had texted her mother to say she could pick her up at work at 2:30 a.m., but Zoe never arrived. Her vehicle was found 3 days later, but not before a man was seen driving it, but he escaped after ditching the Lincoln in an apartment complex. Zoe was never seen again. Since then, many facts about Zoe's travels on the early morning of November 18th have been discovered, but they only seem to cloud the picture of what happened. They include a half-hour phone call from Zoe to a family friend that the friend doesn't remember, a young man who Zoe went to meet who changed his story about seeing her, and an alleged sighting of Zoe at a motel that some people believe, but others don't, on the night/morning she disappeared. Zoe's family believes foul play caused her to go missing. The case remains unsolved. The guest for this episode is Melinda Campos, Zoe's mother. Unfound news. Not a ton of new news to report this week. Emily continues to reach out to families in the hopes of having them on the program. Unfound's business manager, Shay, continues to contact media companies, including SiriusXM, in the hopes of spreading Unfound's influence even further. And I continue to work on the episodes themselves, along with doing some investigative work for future and past guests of Unfound. So, it's business as usual around here, and we're very busy. Where you can find Unfound. Unfound is on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, iTunes, Podomatic, Stitcher, Podbean, and Spotify. In particular, please join us on Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern for the Unfound live video show, which is hosted on the Unfound podcast page on Facebook, not in the private group. You can email the program, unfoundpodcast@gmail.com, the website, unfoundpodcast.com. Please check out the Secret Stephen Kocher episode. The website at Trib Total Media, triblive.com/news/unfound. Unfound has Patreon and PayPal accounts. Your contributions provide for many of the items guests have received so far. I cannot thank all of Unfound's supporters enough. This week I need to thank Lori, Maureen, and Dylan. Unfound merchandise, volumes 1, 2, and 3 on Amazon in both paperback and ebook form. Let's work on getting some great reviews for volumes 2 and 3. If you bought them, please give them a nice review. The playing cards, go to makeplayingcards.com/sell/Unfound Podcast. Shirts for almost all Unfound's cases at unfound-podcast.myshopify.com. This includes the flagship t-shirt, The First Year Cases, that has a collage of everyone from Suzanne Lowell to Jennifer Wilkerson in it. Please check it out. And please mention Unfound on all true crime Facebook pages and other websites and forums. Thank you. I'm so fortunate to have on this episode of Unfound the mother of Zoe Campos, Melinda Campos. Melinda, welcome to Unfound.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Let's start here. Tell the listeners a little bit about Zoe. And in fact, you have 2 daughters, don't you?
Yes, I do have 2 daughters. Savannah is my oldest, and Zoe is my youngest. She was my baby.
And how many years separate your 2 daughters? And how old is Savannah, and how old is Zoe now?
It's a 5-year difference between their ages, and Savannah is 27, and Zoe will this September will be 25.
Okay.
No,
sorry to put you on the spot for that. Sorry to put you on the spot.
That's okay. She's going to be 23.
Okay. All right. So Savannah are separated by about 5 years. But in talking to you, I got the idea that Zoe was a very unique young woman. Her hobbies, her interests, those things. Why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about that?
Yeah. She's very smart, very direct. She likes her hobbies include, like, she likes to go fishing. She loves fishing. She likes being outdoors. She likes dogs, animals, all kinds. Every time I would come home, there would be a different stray at the house, and she just loved animals. And she wanted to go to school to become a mechanic. She liked old cars and the fact of fixing them up and just working on them. That was her. She was a character. She really was. She really is. She was very funny, very clumsy. The biggest heart, but she did have a little temper, so if you made her mad,
watch out.
That was it. She She was 5'1" and probably like 100 pounds, and but she was very, very tough. She could hold her own. No, there was just a lot of times where, you know, things happened in life, and she was the one that was protecting like her sister when she was pregnant, or me, like if someone was being rude to me at a store or something, she would be the one right there, just being really vocal.
Uh-huh. I have to ask you, being that, I mean, my impression, I mean, I'm 47 years old, but my impression is that not too many women get into fixing cars, although there are many women who are into cars, absolutely, but actually working on them, fixing them up. Were you kind of amazed the first time you ever saw like a wrench in Zoe's hand that she said she was going to
Oh
work
my
on a car or
God,
something?
yes, yes. I was like, because she was the daintiest, girliest girl. She loved, makeup and clothes and jewelry and curling her hair and fixing her hair, and she loved all of that. And but yet, a big part of her was like tomboyish. Like she had to, be out there fishing with the boys, or, you know, looking at old vehicles and just trying to see what she could do. Just she had those qualities in her. Like she could be the girliest girl, but yet she could, put on some sweatpants and a t-shirt and be, you know,
Mm-hmm.
rugged, I guess.
Okay. She had a diverse. She had a diverse array of interests and talents.
Yeah, she and she's very smart. She did really good in school. It was just her, like grade wise. It was just she had a really big issue with teachers. Like she always felt like she was being disrespected or talked down to. So I guess she had a problem with certain authority
Mm-hmm.
figures.
And so that ended up being that she didn't graduate from high school. Did she get her equivalence degree then? Equivalent
She
degree?
she was working on it. She was going to a chart like a school for her GED and all that. And again, she just became unfocused and wanted to do more things all at one time, and school was just not a big priority to her.
And let's talk about her father a little bit. What kind of relationship did she have with him? I understand that you two eventually got divorced, but how was that relationship?
Um, Prior to me and Alex getting divorced, uh, Zoe and he were inseparable. I mean, she pretty much had him wrapped around her little pinky. Um, it was everything that Zoe said or Zoe wanted, you know, he would do, and he would still do it after we got divorced. But their relationship kind of it didn't like fade or anything like that. It was just more like she would started growing up more, and she he was away a lot, so that was a big thing in her life, is the fact that he wasn't there on a daily basis. And so they kind of just, they had a relationship, but not as close as they had when we were all just a big family.
Okay. And how did you feel about Zoe when she said that she was going to drop out of high school? Were you worried about that?
I was very much worried. I was very upset. uh I mean, we had several arguments about it. I just, I once she turned 18 and still hadn't graduated, there wasn't really a lot that I could do. I mean, I would wake her up and tell her, okay, let's go to school. I'm gonna take you to school, and it just there's I guess maybe on my part I was too lenient with her, or I didn't try hard enough. I just didn't want to uh, upset her or argue with her or, just have that relationship with her.
Hmm. But was she working? I mean, she didn't just drop out and sit around the house all the time. Did she get a job? What was she doing in that area of her life?
Yeah, she got a job. She became a hostess at a restaurant, and she was there every shift. Um, Even if they needed her, she would go in. There was plenty of times where she like worked a double, and she had complete control of that part of her life, like money wise. She saved up her money and eventually bought her a vehicle, and all on her own, with her, paying her cell phone bill, paying her insurance, doing, what she needed to do, buying things for the vehicle that she had just bought, and gas, and she was very responsible with her money.
Okay. Was she living with you at the time? What was the living situation between you and Zoe, and then her sister Savannah? Were y'all living together or separate, or what was going on at the
Um,
time of Zoe's disappearance?
at the time of Zoe's disappearance, she had been living with my other daughter, Savannah. She had been living with her for about 3 months, 3 or 4 months. She had just moved back with her. I wasn't living with them. I was in a different place. But it was them two who originally got that apartment at the beginning, and then she moved out. And then once my oldest daughter needed her help, she came back to the apartment.
Okay. So Zoe and Savannah were living together at the time of Zoe's disappearance, and we'll get into maybe that living situation a little bit later as to where Zoe was that night. But you were living by yourself, but your daughters were living together.
Correct.
Okay. Was that close? Were they right down the street, or what?
Um, from their apartment to where I was living, it's probably about a 10-minute drive. It wasn't far, but it wasn't just like down the street or the next block. No, but
Okay.
it was pretty close.
Pretty close for a decent sized city like Lubbock.
Correct.
Okay. Tell the listeners maybe a little bit about a couple young men that Zoe was dating. My impression was that you liked one of them, and then the other one you weren't so hot about. Maybe we can talk about. I mean, anytime a woman disappears, we end up talking about those men who were in her life. Why don't you tell the listeners about these two guys? You can just use their first names.
Okay. Well, her first like serious boyfriend that she had was his name was Joe, and I actually knew we knew Joe. I've known Joe since he was younger. We just kind of, because I was military when I was married. Well, my ex is military, so we moved around a lot, and but we always knew their family and him. It just so happened once Zoe got into her sophomore year, I believe, or her freshman year, she got reintroduced to Joe, and they started dating, and they dated for a while. I want to say 2 to 3 years, and I really liked him. He's a good kid. He was very respectful. His family's very respectful. So I really did like him. It's just both of them had high strung personalities. So I think in the end, that's what caused their breakup.
Mhm.
And Zoe started dating another individual, another young man. His name was Jacob, and I didn't like him at all. It's just like a first impression, first instinct, like a just an instinct that I had that I just didn't care for him. I didn't like the way he his personality was. I didn't like, and he wasn't ugly. It was just he was he was he was real cocky and real arrogant,
Hmm.
and that I just didn't like. I just didn't like him. I did it.
So Joe was around Zoe's age. Was Jacob also around Zoe's age, or was he a little bit older?
He was a little bit older than her. I think he was probably about 2 to 3 years older than her, and he already had kids, uh, a kid. So I think that was another factor to which I didn't like because of the fact that Zoe really just doesn't need to be. She didn't need to be dating someone that already had a kid. That was just you know what I was thinking.
Okay. Would you say that Zoe and Jacob were an item at the time of her disappearance, or had they broken things off before then?
They had broken things off, but I do believe they would still kind of text each other. Um, Both of them were. They She was single at the time of her disappearance. She didn't have a boyfriend, but she would still keep in contact with Jacob. And I believe every once in a while she would talk to Joe, just hi, how are you and stuff like that.
Okay. We'll talk about them maybe a little bit later in this conversation. One thing we are going to touch upon, and we are only talking about this because it could be an element of Zoe's disappearance. We realize that the attitude toward marijuana use is changing in this country. A lot of states have legalized it and everything, but this could be something that led to her disappearance. We're just not sure. My experience is that drugs, whether it's legal or illegal or somewhere in between, often do lead to disappearances. Once again, with this show that I do, Unfound. But if you could just shortly talk about Zoe and her marijuana use. And once again, we're bringing this up because of what the last person who saw her says about the night that she disappeared. What can you tell listeners just shortly a little bit about that?
Um, I never hit the fact that Zoe did smoke marijuana. That was always something that I was very honest about and could still continue to be honest about. Did I approve of it? No, no, I did not. Um, I would tell her just don't don't be around people when that you don't know when you're smoking because it really does factor in like into your thoughts, your state of mind. And that was the only thing that I ever asked of her. I just said, "Be honest with me and tell me the truth about this stuff." And like I said, I never ever approved of her smoking, but
Mm-hmm.
it was something that I mean, she was going to do it behind my back anyway, so I just rather have known than not know.
All right. And it wasn't like she was living with you. She wasn't living under your roof. She was 18 years old. By most standards, she's an adult.
Yeah,
So what are you
she
going to
had
do,
her
right?
own money.
Yeah.
Yeah, she had her own money.
Yep.
She wasn't asking me for money for it, so you know there really wasn't any way really to stop her. I mean, I could tell her till I was blue in the face, though we don't do it, but at the
Mm.
end of the day, that's what she was going to do.
Now in Texas, it is illegal. Did you ever worry about her getting caught or anything like that?
Oh my God, all the time. I
Mm.
always just told told them don't drive with it. Don't take it with you. Don't. And that really didn't work. But I really did worry about, what would happen if she got pulled over or, something
Yeah,
like that. And
sure.
that would be something on her record permanently.
But that never happened.
No, no.
Okay. Okay. And we should reassert that she was working, she was paying her bills, she was taking care of her life. It was not like her using this drug was getting in the way of those things. She was being a responsible adult.
Yes, she always made sure that everything she needed to do was being done. As far as like, her bills.
Okay. And do you have any idea where she was getting her marijuana from?
I do not. Um, I know it's somebody from what the girls tell me, which is my oldest daughter and her. Somebody that they knew, and so they would always just go to this one individual.
And and once again, I'm only asking because this is going to come up later in the conversation. Do you happen to? You don't have to say the person's name, but do you know the person's name?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I
Okay.
don't.
And, all right. We will cover that later, just to set that up. Okay. Um, let's talk about those days leading up to her disappearance. Anything that you look back and say, well, that was a little weird, something, maybe something that now at the time didn't seem like a big deal, but now does?
Um, Actually, no. Like, um, nothing stuck out. Nothing was out of the ordinary. She was basically, just doing what she needed to do. If she wasn't working, she was babysitting my grandkids. Um, she Nothing was out of the ordinary. I do remember the last day I saw her, and I don't know if that sticks out to me because it was the last day, but I just felt like that one that day just was a little not weird, but a little bit more uh what emotional.
Mm-hmm.
Not really emotional because I just remember that Sunday that I saw her,
Okay.
and they were leaving because I had to get ready for work, and they had came over to where I was staying, and I just remember looking right into her eyes, and she just said, "Okay, baby cake, I love you." And I said, "I love you too, Zoe. I love you, baby girl." And we hugged. I mean, we always hug when we say bye, but this one was just a little bit different, just because we looked at each other.
Okay.
And I don't think that meant anything. I just think that it was because that was the last day that I saw her, the last time.
So you saw her that Sunday before she disappeared. Did your other sister or your other, let me start that again. Did your other daughter, Savannah, who was living with Zoe, has she since then ever told you, I think that seemed like Zoe was maybe getting a couple strange phone calls? Has your other daughter, Savannah, ever said anything to you about those days before Zoe's disappearance, being that the two of them were living together?
No, nothing out of the ordinary. No different calls. Zoe would Zoe and Savannah were really close. I mean, really, really close. Yes, they were sisters, but that's who they leaned on each other. They didn't have, a whole lot of girlfriends or anything like that. So it was them two all the time. And Zoe never mentioned any strange phone calls to herself. That she never mentioned it to Savannah. It was all pretty much all the same. Zoe was really big on social media. She was always on that, but nothing nothing that she ever brought forward to Savannah saying, "Hey, this person is really creeping me out," or anything like that.
So neither, for example, this is just an example. So neither Joe nor Jacob suddenly appeared at their apartment or anything like that, or were cruising by, anything like that.
Not no, not that, what if they showed up at the apartment, it was because the girls knew about it.
Okay. Never, Savannah never got the idea that Zoe was being stalked by anybody, including her ex-boyfriend.
No.
Okay. You said that you saw her on that day, that Sunday, November 17th,
Mhm.
2013. Tell the listeners a little bit about the day. What you remember? You said you saw her. Zoe was going somewhere that day. She was going to somebody, a friend of hers' house, somebody who just had a baby. Why don't you tell the listeners about that?
Oh, that part, I didn't realize that she was. I didn't know she was going to her house. I actually didn't
Oh,
even know she was still in contact with this person.
oh, okay.
But apparently, she the her friend April had just had a baby, and Zoe had went to go see the baby that night. But for from my understanding, the girls, my daughters, were going to hang out together all day. They were both off. They weren't uh, really going to do anything big. They were just going to grab dinner, hang out. They had went to the store earlier that day and bought like water guns for the kids because that day just happened to be, really warm.
Hmm.
So they were doing that, and they were going to go home and finish getting ready, and then uh, they were going to go out to dinner, and they got some movies, and then went back to the apartment.
Okay.
But Zoe had went to go see her friend April before they had went to dinner,
All right. So
is
some
from what I'm
maybe
understanding now.
all right. So you didn't know that at the time. You really didn't know what Savannah and Zoe were doing that day. You just knew that they were together.
Right.
All right. Did Savannah go with Zoe over to this girl's house, April's house, or not?
No, no,
She
Savannah
didn't.
didn't go. She had stayed at the apartment with the kids.
Okay. So was this some type of baby shower, or was this just a general? Zoe knew April was home, so she decided to stop in. Was this a gathering, a party, or is it something a little more unplanned?
From my understanding, it was just something that was unplanned. Apparently, April had just got out of the hospital. I don't know if it was that day or a couple of days before,
Mm.
but her baby was, you know, it was a brand new newborn. So Zoe had went to go and see him and see the baby and see April as well.
Okay. How did Zoe and April know each other?
Back they had went to school. They had went to school together. They went to. I believe they met her freshman year,
Hmm. Okay.
freshman to sophomore year at the high school.
And did you know that Zoe and April were still in contact with each other? And is your opinions of April pretty good?
I have nothing bad to say about her. I didn't know that they were still in contact with each other. Like I said, the last time uh, I had seen April was probably when they were like 15 or 16. Um, I remember April would come over and spend the night with Zoe. They would have a sleepover, and that was it. But once I just assumed they weren't speaking anymore.
Okay, just kind of grew apart or something.
Mhm.
Okay. So she goes there. She comes home. She and Savannah get together with Savannah's children, who I'm going to understand. I'm going to guess, or being that Savannah would have been in her mid 20s. Her kids were very young, maybe 5 years old or younger, something like that.
Yeah, they
Mm.
4 and 3, I believe at the time.
Okay. So they get together. They go out to dinner. But there is another girl who was with them, Jessica. Is that right?
Yes, Jessica had met them at the apartment, and they were just hanging out, um, getting ready and stuff. I guess uh, Jessica was going to stay over that night because Jessica had to work early the next morning. So, and her job was just down the street from the apartment, so she she was going to stay the night.
Okay. So they're all there, and what does? Of course, you're finding out about this afterwards. What do Savannah and Jessica? say about that night when they get back to Savannah's apartment?
After dinner, they uh I was told that they stopped and got a movie. They went back to the apartment. Um, they put the movie on for all of them were downstairs watching the movie with the kids, and they were just hanging out. Around 11:30, uh, Savannah says goodnight. She takes the kids up, puts them down. She said Jessica was already almost asleep, and Zoe was dozing on and off from the movie, so she just assumed everybody was going to go to sleep. And she went upstairs and fell asleep with the kids, and that was the last time she saw her.
All right. And Jessica says that she fell asleep too, and when she fell asleep, Zoe was still in the apartment.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, they were both still in the apartment.
All right. Now, later that night, though, Zoe texted you, didn't she?
Yes.
All right. Tell the listeners, because that's going to be the next time that anybody in your family has any interaction with Zoe. It's not until after 2 a.m. That she texts you. You were at work that night. Why don't you explain what all happened there?
Yeah. I was at the time of her disappearance. I was working at a bar, and I had shut down the bar, and a lot of my car was in the shop. So uh, behind the bar, there's a house that sometimes I would stay in if I didn't have a ride to get to my place, or So I got a text. I want to say it was probably about 2:20, 2:15, 2:20, and it was from Zoe asking if I needed a ride, and I said sure, yeah, and she said okay, and so I waited about 10 minutes. Uh, she still hadn't showed up, so I called her, and didn't get any response back.
Was this unusual for her to text you, would you say, at a late hour like that and ask if you needed a ride home? Is fairly unusual, or had she picked you up from work before?
No, she hadn't picked me up. At the time, I guess I didn't really even think twice about it, or wondered what is she doing up, or I just assumed she was up at the apartment, and you know she just wanted to come see if I needed a ride. Um, so I guess now that I think back, it should have been unusual to me, but I just didn't even think about it like that at the time.
Let me just put it this way. Were you surprised to get a text from her at 2:20 a.m. asking if you needed a ride home? That surprised you?
Oh yes,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I was surprised, but it was a happy surprise. Like
Of course.
anytime that I could have spent time with them, I did.
Of course. This house that you were going to stay at, you said it was near where you worked. Is this like a friend's house, or what is?
Yeah, it's actually it's right behind the bar that I work, and my friend lived back there. But every once in a while, if I needed to, I could, I would stay there.
Okay. Was this the owner of the bar, or does this not? Was this
No,
something?
he was more like a groundskeeper. He watched the bar at night after it closed, and then he would wake up early in the morning and clean the parking lot and all that. He was a really good, really really good friend, and that was it. I mean, he was an older gentleman, and he was really nice to me and to my kids, and he was just a decent man.
Okay. Is this person different than the other guy we're going to talk about later, Ben?
Oh yes, definitely. This
Definitely
guy,
two different people.
Yes, he's more. I would always call him my dad.
Oh,
He's like
okay.
my dad. That's what I would call him.
Okay. So we're going to talk about a friend of yours. His name came up in the Disappeared episode. We're going to talk about him a
Hmm.
little later. So when she never showed up, what'd you think?
I thought maybe she just fell asleep, and she wasn't going to come. Like I said, I waited about 10 minutes, and I called her back, and her phone rang and rang and rang and rang, and then went to voicemail. And so I called her right back, and it just started going straight to voicemail. So I just assumed she fell asleep, and I told my friend, I was like, well, I guess she fell asleep. She's not going to come for me. And so I went into the other room, and you know, I went to sleep.
Okay. Later that morning, of course, now it would be the same day. But when did you? So that was the last communication that you had with Zoe. When did you realize that next morning or next afternoon that something wasn't right?
It was that later on that morning, probably about 7:45. Uh, Savannah called me and wanted to know if Zoe was with me, and I had told her no. She said that because Zoe was going to take care of the kid, and she wasn't there at the apartment.
Hmm. Did you tell Savannah about how you got a text from Zoe the night before or earlier that
Yeah,
morning?
yes, I told her. I was like, she texted me to come give me a ride. I was like, but I told her, I was like, she never showed up. I told her, I was like, I just assumed she was there at the apartment. She's like, well, she was here when I went to bed. So
Hmm. And Jessica was still there. Did she? Was she able to offer any? Of course, we know that what the story was, but is that what Jessica said, that she fell asleep on the couch and Zoe was still there?
yes, she said her statement was that Zoe and her were downstairs. Jessica had fell asleep, and she looked at Zoe, and Zoe was, dozing off and on, and so Jessica just fell asleep. She said she didn't even know Zoe had left or anything.
Okay. And once again, when you got that text from her, from Zoe, saying that, asking if she was needed to pick you up, you took for granted that she was still at home when she did that. Of course, we're going to find out that that wasn't the case. But that was your impression, though, that earlier that morning.
Yes,
Yeah.
I
Okay.
yeah, I just I'm usually from my understanding, she wasn't out in the streets that late, so
Mm-hmm.
I just assumed that she was at home.
Right. Did Savannah end up calling other people? Did you end up calling people? What did you do when you figured out that Zoe wasn't at the apartment, at Savannah's apartment? Her car is gone. Of course, you of course would know that you tried to call her after she texted you. She didn't get back to you. What did you do next that day? That would have been Monday.
Uh, that Monday we called. Well, Savannah called uh, Jacob to see if he had seen her. Uh, she called Joe, and She called Jessica to see if she knew when Zoe had left. Um, she started calling her cousins, their cousins, and seeing if anybody had heard from her, and no one had. Um, Savannah came and picked me up, and I went to the apartment with her. Back to the apartment, we started calling hospitals. We started calling the jails, um, and nobody had, she wasn't in nowhere. Nobody had seen her, and nobody had talked to her.
Right. So you
Um,
so you knew her car wasn't at Savannah's, so it's possible that she could have left at right after Jessica fell asleep, maybe at around 12:30 that morning, or she could have left right before Savannah and her kids and Jessica woke up. I mean, it's a huge time frame in there when she could have left.
According to what I now know,
Mm-hmm.
she
I'm just saying what you
probably
knew. I
left
mean, we know
right
it
after.
eventually, but
Yeah,
but at that point, you're thinking, man, she could have left at 12:30. She could have left at 6:30 in the morning. We just don't know,
yeah, yeah. Like
right?
I didn't know like what time. I mean, I was like wondering where is she? What is she doing?
Mm-hmm. And
So I mean, we didn't know.
okay, so you're letting your family members know, you're calling people, and I'm guessing at some point you figured out that you were the last person that you could find that communicated with your daughter, and that would have been that text at 2:20 a.m.
Correct. Yes, and I was just like I didn't know what had happened. I I was a mess. I was lost.
Mm-hmm. Of course you were. Of course. When did the police get involved?
Um, that Monday we called uh the Lubbock Police Department, and we gave them the situation. We told them what was going on. Uh, a policeman showed up at the apartment and didn't take a didn't make a report or anything. They just said they were going to put an APB on her vehicle. Um, and that's what they were going to do. They were going to. He said we'll look for the vehicle, but didn't take any information about her or anything.
Okay.
And that's how that Monday that night went. I stayed there with my daughter, and we just we were still calling. I think we called the hospital like numerous times, and the jail, and her friends. Have you seen her now? And nobody had seen her.
And your family was out riding around looking for her car, looking for her as well.
Yeah, yeah. Once we did the following day when we still hadn't heard anything, uh, went ahead and called the police again, and they took the report, and that's that's when more of my family started getting involved and looking for her vehicle, driving down county roads and trying to go from the apartment to where I was working, different streets, different ways to see if maybe, they would see her car or something, and nothing was, we never saw her vehicle up until a couple days later.
And we should point out that the car that Zoe had, it's not like it's a white, Toyota Camry, or a Honda Accord, which it seemed like they're a dime a dozen. She had a Lincoln Town Car, but it had some damage
Mhm.
on the driver's side. So it should have really stuck out.
Yeah, it was the whole front fender was uh, messed up. I guess the vehicle was in a wreck before,
Mm-hmm.
and it's big old long silver car, and the front fender was, it was damaged. So it wouldn't be hard to spot this vehicle.
And like you said, the Lubbock police, had an all points bulletin out looking for this car. And they, in those first few days, never saw it anywhere.
No,
Never saw it anywhere.
no, the police never saw it. Uh, didn't I didn't actually hear from the police until we called them
Right.
a couple of days later.
Okay. In those first couple days, was there any talk about possibly pinging Zoe's phone or doing anything with the phone company, try to get triangulation on where uh, the phone could be, or even possibly where she was when she texted you the last time? Any talk of that in those first couple days?
Not in the first couple of days. It wasn't until I met, I guess they assigned a detective to the case,
Hmm.
and met with him. And apparently, he had already been working on the case. And he said, they were uh, pinging her phone and looking at all her social media, uh, her Facebook, and seeing what they could see. Uh,
Okay. All right. At this point, I know you. I mean, you're worried, sick, and of course that feeling continues to this day. But did you have any ideas, guesses, rumors in those first couple days as what could have happened to her? Your best guess as what could have happened. Did you
um,
did you suspect somebody as if something bad happened, or did it lean more toward, well, maybe she ran away or decided to take off? What were you leaning toward?
I never once, never once thought that she ran away, because you know she wouldn't have done that. She wouldn't have hurt us like that. Um, I just, at the very beginning, at first, I didn't know what happened to her. I honestly was just completely just clueless. I didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
Once I met with the detective that was assigned to the case, uh, he pretty much informed me of, or schooled me about, human trafficking. Uh, I had heard about it before, but only in movies, and I just thought it was something that happened, in different places. I never knew that it was happening here in Lubbock. So pretty much that was what I was being told, because of the fact that she was pretty, she was young, she was petite, that that might be what had happened. So basically, at the very beginning of all of this, I'm it's in my head that she's being sold. So
Okay.
that was the only thing that I had. That was the only thing that I was thinking.
Okay. And given her age and she's an attractive young woman, etc., that is a possibility, of course, absolutely. Um, so you have these days. Monday goes into Tuesday, goes into Wednesday. I'm guessing no leads. I don't think that they had done any of the phone work yet, but miraculously, maybe you might say, her car is spotted. Why don't you tell the listeners about how that happened?
Yeah. I was I was at work, and my sister was driving home after, because they had been driving the streets looking for her, trying to see if they could spot her car. Um, she was just actually just on her way home and sees the vehicle. She spots Zoe's car. I remember I got a text saying, "Is or a phone call saying, is Zoe's car, is there damage to the front?" And I said, "Yes." She said, "Okay, well, I see it. I'm following it." She had turned back around and started following the vehicle. She had called uh, her son, who was also out there driving around, and was telling him where she was. Pretty much a proximity of how where they were going. And I called 911. Um, she called 911, and we were. She was just basically following this vehicle, following it, and apparently she was trying to stay back away so they wouldn't. Whoever was driving wouldn't notice her following him.
Mm-hmm.
She did at one point pull alongside the vehicle and looked to see if it was Zoe. And she said the person had broad shoulders, a hoodie, a jacket with a hood over his head, and that she could tell it was a male. She continued following it. I guess the person that was driving the vehicle noticed and started trying to lose my sister for a period of time, not a period, for a few seconds. Basically, she lost him, but found him again. But by that time, the individual had parked Zoe's car in an apartment complex, and no one was found. She she did state at one time that that she did state that she saw the individual running. Um, all she could see was like high tops, shorts, and the hoodie.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but we, she never, she went, her and the son showed up there as well, my nephew, and um, tried to look for the individual, and they weren't nowhere to be found.
Let's just be clear about this because this is something that I noticed in the Disappeared episode that I watched a couple times before doing this interview. In the Disappeared episode regarding Zoe's disappearance, it's not stated that Zoe's aunt saw this guy run away from the vehicle. In fact, she says that the car turned, she kept going straight, and then she circled back around. And by the time she got to the car was empty. You're saying
Yes,
that that is not necessarily correct, that she might have done that, but by the time she got to the car, she did see somebody get out of the car and run away.
yes. Well, she didn't see them get out of the car. She just saw
Mm.
an individual running. Um, this is um, this is something that she has been saying on the show Disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
I myself received two two copies. They gave me two copies of the episode, but there's also it's the episode that they aired, plus there's additional um, interviews
Okay.
with individuals, and that's the copy that I have, and that's what I heard.
Okay. So what you're saying is that is what this aunt of Zoe said, but she did say something about somebody running away from the car, but it didn't make the final cut that made it on TV.
Correct.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to clear that up because I'm sure many people have seen that episode and they're going to say, well, it's not mentioned in the episode. Actually, Zoe's aunt did say this. It just cut out of the episode, and the listeners should know, being that I used to do some film and TV production way back in the day, that happens quite
Hmm.
often. Very,
Yes,
very
and
quite.
it also doesn't tell that she did call 911 as well.
Okay.
I've gotten a lot of comments about why didn't the aunt call 911. She did call 911. Um, like I said, we all called 911 several times.
Okay. This area where she encountered this car, a part of town that you know well, part of town that Zoe, did she know anybody in this area where this car was first seen? And how long would you say that Zoe's aunt followed this car before it got parked? Was it a mile? Was it 5 miles? Do you know?
Um, as far as I know, in that area that the vehicle was spotted, it's a main street here in Lubbock. It's called uh, University,
Okay.
and my sister lives off of that main street. So that's why she saw it, because she was going home.
Mm-hmm.
Um, other than that, I don't. Zoe didn't know anybody that lived in that area, that part of where she first spotted the vehicle. I believe she followed it. I want to say maybe it wasn't far from that area to where the car was parked. Um, it's probably about 5 miles, 4 miles.
Okay, so she wasn't behind this car very long. Yeah, and
No, not at all.
I think your impression is that at some point the person driving that car got kind of figured out that somebody was following them. So he figured, well, I got to ditch this car.
Yes.
Okay.
That's what I think is what happened.
Okay. And how far is this apartment complex from where Savannah and Zoe were living?
Actually, that from where Savannah and Zoe lived to that apartment complex, it's a 2 minute drive, 3 minute drive.
So very close.
Yes.
So the car was spotted on this University Boulevard. I guess it wasn't too far away from Zoe and Savannah's apartment. And then where it ended up, 2 or 3 minute drive, is not very far either.
No, not at all. That's why we were just like, wow.
Okay. So you, I think, eventually show up at this car. Now, the agonizing thing about this, the cops did not respond to these 911 calls, did they?
No. They said, what I was told personally was, there's other emergencies that were first, that became priority. This one wasn't a priority. From the time that the car was parked to the actual time that an officer showed up was 2.5 hours.
Wow. So they're calling 911 to say we're following the car of this missing girl, and the police aren't doing anything.
No. And while we're sitting in the parking lot waiting, we're still calling 911. We're still saying, where is the cop? Because in my mind, I'm thinking, what if she's in the trunk? I'm not allowed to touch the vehicle. One of my family members works for the sheriff, and he's like, don't touch the car because fingerprints and, evidence. And I'm just like, I need to see if she's in the trunk. I need to. And, you can't even imagine my frustration, my how crazy I was going every time I would call 911 and just say, where are y'all? What if my daughter's in the trunk? I was livid. I was beside myself. I didn't know what to do. My family's trying to calm me down and trying to talk me, to calm down. So then we start knocking at doors in front of the apartment, the apartments that were in front of the car, and asking, have you ever seen this vehicle here before? And, whoever would answer the door, we would talk to. It was starting to get late, so, people weren't answering. But it was a crazy night. And then finally, when the cops showed up, they don't want to talk to me first. As the mother, they don't want to talk to me because of the fact that I'm irritated. I'm frustrated. I am upset. I'm emotional. And the cop is so rude and tells me, step aside, I'm not going to talk to you. And I'm just freaking out. My sister had to pull me and say, calm down, come over here, calm down. He talks to my nephew who works for the sheriff, like I said, talks to him, and we're telling him, the missing girl, this is what's going on. We just spotted the vehicle. can you open the trunk? And finally, after about 15, 20 minutes, they opened the trunk, and no, there's no sign of her.
Okay. Let me just ask you some questions, Melinda, about the car, and I know this is very difficult. Was the car, being that it was left there, somebody ran away, was it locked? Were the keys in it?
The keys were not in it. The vehicle was unlocked. I mean, we looked like through the windows, to see what was in there, and there was a jacket, her cell phone charger. Zoe doesn't go anywhere without her cell phone charger. That was in there.
Okay.
In the back seat.
The charger was in the back seat.
Yes.
Okay. That also probably, being that the car was unlocked, that also probably, you standing there waiting to open it, probably also added to it, being that you knew you could get into the car if you wanted to, but it was unlocked, because it was unlocked, but you didn't want to.
Yeah. Yeah, I wanted to, but I just couldn't. I didn't want to mess with, if they found anything.
Of course.
But at the same time, I wanted to get in that vehicle.
Okay.
And I kept walking around the vehicle, and before they opened it, and I just remember saying, I just remember saying, Zoe, if you're in there, I'm right here, and we're going to open it real soon. I just remember just walking around, just saying that, Zoe, I'm right here, if you're in there.
Do we need to take a moment there, Melinda?
I am good. That was just a moment. It's past.
Okay. Okay. Are we to understand that Zoe's car was somewhere in Lubbock during those few days? Was her license plate on the car?
Yes.
Okay. And this time of night that this car was being driven, what time of night was it when Zoe's aunt originally saw the car?
I believe it was at between 9 and 9:30. Okay. Is the timeline that we got.
All right. So just to frame this for the listeners, we're to understand Zoe is missing. She's been missing for 2 to 3 days. And somebody, we don't know if this guy is the person who caused Zoe to disappear, maybe found the car on some street somewhere, we just don't know. But somebody was driving Zoe's car on the main street in Lubbock with her license plate on it.
Correct.
I have to admit, that's a little strange.
It is. Like, I don't understand. I don't know if they were going to ditch the car somewhere, or I don't.
It's also amazing that the police didn't see it. Lubbock has a decent-sized police department. It's a Lincoln. It has a damaged front fender. I mean, how many Lincolns with damaged left front fenders can there be in Lubbock, Texas? I don't think too many.
Exactly.
So that is something that is still a big question in my mind. 5 years later, 4.5 years later.
And in mine as well.
Okay, so what we're saying is there was nothing done to the car to disguise it in any way. It wasn't like somebody else's license plate on it. Nobody tried to change the rims on it. Nobody tried to paint it. Nothing like that. It was just her car.
No, it was exactly how Zoe had it.
Okay.
Nothing out of place. Okay. Nothing.
What was in the car? Now there was a man's gray sweatshirt in it. Any logo on it? Any insignia on it? Anything that might lead anybody to believe who owned that sweatshirt?
No, it was just a gray zipped up uh hoodie. Her, like I said, her phone charger was in the back seat. There was nothing in the front seat. Um, when they opened the trunk, Zoe's purse was in there. Um, her jacket was in there. Um, gray duct tape wires um, was basically it.
But that's not as suspicious as everybody might make it out to be. The
No,
duct
no,
tape and the
because
wire. Please explain to the listeners why that's not as suspicious as it might sound.
the duct tape and the wires was something that she had used prior because she had just got a new grill for her car, and she couldn't find the bolts to put it in, so she actually just put like a little bit of wiring in it and used a little bit of the duct tape for the wiring. And that's what that was for.
Okay. Yeah, we started hearing about duct tape and wire in missing persons cases, and people's minds go in a different direction. So I want to make
Yeah.
sure that we keep everybody's mind on what those things, what their purpose actually was, and it's not as suspicious as we might think. The police did process the car. It's been 4.5 years later. Did they get any fingerprints off of the car? Anything? And uh, was there anything in the car that showed any signs of violence or anything like that?
Um, according to them, when they took the vehicle, they could not get any um, fingerprints. They were just partials that they said they got. Um, the car was actually towed that night to the police department, and then it was released the next day.
And it was sent back to you?
Yes.
All right. And so they processed it, but once again, fingerprints haven't been able to, allegedly couldn't get any fingerprints off the car. That's a little hard to believe, being that it was sitting somewhere for 3 days. But no signs of anything else in there, as far as
Nope.
DNA, anything like that in the car that you know of, that the police have told you.
That I know of, no. I don't know exactly what they did to process the vehicle. All I know is that fingerprints were not found, or just partial fingerprints. And then they released the vehicle. So,
Okay. When you got the vehicle back, between yourself, your other daughter Savannah, maybe other people in your family, when you got the car back, was there anything to you that stuck out as being unusual about the vehicle that maybe the police wouldn't have noticed since they didn't know Zoe like you did?
when we finally got the vehicle, and I was actually able to just be in there, um, there there really wasn't. There was nothing out of place, nothing um, nothing alarming or disturbing about the vehicle. The police had already taken her her charger, the men's jacket, her purse, her jacket. They had already taken all that. So
Her purse was in the car.
her purse was in the trunk.
Oh, her purse was in the trunk.
Hmm.
Okay. And you never got to see what's in the purse.
No,
Okay.
no.
All right. Okay.
Um,
Somehow I missed that when we talked before. I didn't have that in my notes. So her purse was found in the trunk.
yeah.
Okay. And did the police ever tell you what they found in her purse?
No,
Okay.
no, they never. Till this day, I don't know. They said they ran the jacket for DNA, and that nothing came out of it. But come to find out, I guess they had questioned Jacob,
Mm-hmm.
and he had said he had worn that prior.
So you're telling me that Jacob owned up to that sweatshirt being his? Really?
Yeah, that he had borrowed it from uh, Ben, and he had used it once when him and Zoe were together, and he had just left it there. So originally it belonged to Ben, but now Jacob was the one that was wearing it.
All right, well, we're going to talk about Ben here in a second. So that gray sweatshirt, when you saw it in there, you didn't know whose it was, but eventually somebody who you know ended up owning up to owning it.
Right. When I saw it that night that we found the vehicle,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know whose it was. I had no idea.
Okay, but then eventually, you did find
It
out.
comes
So
out
let's
that
let's put it. Um, let's put it this way: the sweatshirt that was found in the vehicle was not owned by the guy who ended up parking it there and running away,
no.
at least to our
As
knowledge.
far as I know, no, because um they it was already whenever they talked to or questioned Jacob, it was told that he told that he was the one wearing it at one point in time, and he
Okay.
said he told who it belonged to.
Okay. Were you aware that Zoe was riding around with a sweatshirt from your friend Ben? Once we're gonna talk to him about him in a moment. Were you aware that she was riding around with one of Ben's sweatshirts in her car?
No,
When was
no,
the last time
I
that you were in the car with Zoe?
uh, probably about I want to say 2 weeks prior to her going missing.
Okay.
I remember
And
she had picked me up and took me she took me to the store.
okay. At that time, do you remember seeing any sweatshirts or other people's clothes in the back seat of her vehicle?
No,
All right. And when you talked to
no, but
Savannah, once you found out about this sweatshirt and who it belonged to, did Savannah remember, being that they all went out? I'm guessing that they went in Zoe's car. Does she remember ever seeing a sweatshirt or shirt or anybody else's clothes in Zoe's car?
no, no. The when they went out, it was in Savannah's car.
Oh, they didn't take Zoe's car. They took Savannah's car. Okay.
Right.
Okay. Um, when do you think the last time was that Savannah was in Zoe's car? Can you even take a guess?
Probably when she bought it.
All right, so it was a
Um,
while. It was a while.
yeah, yeah, because Savannah, had her own vehicle.
Okay. And since November 2013, has anybody told you that I was in Zoe's car and saw other people's clothes in it? Anybody
No,
ever? No.
no.
Okay.
Other than the police, I mean,
Right.
letting me know that.
All I'm trying to establish is I'm trying to figure out if Zoe was really riding around with some other guy's sweatshirt in the back of her car. That seems a little unusual to me. But I don't know your
Yeah.
daughter. I don't know her. You of course do. Does that sound unusual to you?
Um, it really doesn't, because I know when she bought the vehicle, um, she was still talking to Jacob,
Mm-hmm.
and her and Jacob and Ben were 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 still talking a little bit.
We have to remind the listeners, Jacob is the boyfriend and Ben is a friend of yours. And
Correct.
Ben and Jacob knew each other?
Yes.
Okay, were they close? Were they friends? How did they know each other?
Um, they met through Zoe.
Oh, they met through Zoe. Okay, we're just going to leave it at that because we're going to talk about Ben here in a little bit. Let's move on to this. When did you discover that Zoe actually went out after everyone went to bed that night? Remember, Savannah goes to bed with her children. Jessica falls asleep on the couch. Zoe's still there, but you found out somehow that Zoe went out after that. How did that all happen?
Uh, it all happened through one of the many times that I would go to the police department and talk to my detective, and he finally came out and said that I believe there was a text message that got Zoe out of the house, and that was the last. There was a phone call, a couple of phone calls, and the text messages that she sent me.
After the Savannah went to bed, after Jessica fell asleep, Zoe had some interaction with someone besides you. We know about the text, but somebody else after those women went to bed.
Yes. What I'm finding out is she had met an individual when she had went to go see April's baby.
Okay.
April introduced her to a friend of hers, and that person, they exchanged numbers, Zoe and this individual, and um, from what I'm being told is they had communication after 11:30, and from what we're understanding or trying to piece together is he's the one that took her out of, not took her, but made her come out of the apartment.
Okay. This is a guy who was. They did not say his name on the disappeared episode, but we're going to use his first name just to
Hmm.
make the telling of all of this a little easier. You should know that Melinda knows his last name. I know his last name, but we're going to keep it under wraps for now. But his first name is Carlos. Um, Once again, they did not use his name in the disappeared episode. Did he also not send her a message on Facebook about coming over or something like that?
Yes, there was a message on Facebook, and there were phone calls on her cell phone, and I believe there was a text message.
Okay.
And then prior to the one I received, and then after, I believe after 2:30 to, I believe it was still till 6 o'clock in the morning, he was still texting her cell phone.
Okay. So through all this, through the phone, we'll get into the pings here in a moment. But uh, Carlos was the guy that she met at April's baby party, this get together. I'm taking that Zoe and Carlos never met before.
Correct.
All right. And when did the police find out about Carlos, and how when did they go talk to him, and what did he have to say?
At the beginning, from my understanding, it wasn't until they got Zoe's phone records, because they, of course, have to get the warrant and everything. And they saw the calls, and also they got a warrant for her Facebook account. And they saw her messages. At the beginning, Carlos was saying that he wasn't with her. He met her at April's. He did own up to that, but
Mm-hmm.
he was saying, no, I didn't see her. No, I didn't hang out with her. And then I guess after a couple of interviews is when he finally came back and said that he did see her that night. They hung out, they smoked, and I guess he wanted to smoke again, or both of them wanted to smoke again. But Zoe had said she had to go get some more weed, and his story is that she left and never came back.
Okay. So she's at home with Savannah and Jessica. Carlos, who had just met her earlier that day, starts contacting her. Maybe he was contacting her all evening. We're not sure. But she decides that she's going to go see this Carlos fella. She jumps in her car. She goes over to his house. Was he living by himself, or did he have roommates, or what was his living situation at the time?
I believe he was living with his parent, his brother, and I believe that's it. I don't know if his the mother of his children was living there at the time.
Okay, so Carlos had at least one child already.
Uh, yes, at least one.
Okay, and how old is Carlos at the time?
He's Zoe. He was Zoe's age. He was probably about 18, 19 when they
Okay.
first met.
All right, so it's not like Carlos is living in his own place where Zoe would go over there and it would just be the two of them. You're telling me that he was living at home and there were at least a couple other people under the same roof with him. So if Zoe showed up at his place, it might have been late and those people might have been in bed, but it wasn't like Zoe and Carlos were alone.
No, according to Carlos's story, they stayed uh, outside in her car.
Oh, so maybe Zoe never went inside. Okay. So she gets over there. Carlos is there. Uh, they're smoking weed, and then Carlos is saying that they ran out of marijuana, and Zoe, I guess, volunteered or said that she could get some more. She left. She never came back. That is Carlos's story. And there is at least proof that he tried to message her at like 4 a.m., 6 a.m., trying to find out where she was. Is that right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. But we also have to remember that he originally lied to the police saying that he never saw her that night.
Yes.
All right. And then he finally broke down. Do you know if Carlos has ever been given a lie detector test regarding that night?
No, as far as to my knowledge, he has not. Only because um, once he started getting questioned about Zoe, uh, he quickly lawyered up, and so according to my detective, it was very hard to talk to him.
Right. Okay. So he lied, and then he told the truth, but we just don't know how much truth he really told. He at least admitted
Correct.
to meeting Zoe, um, but then he says she left, and we just don't know, aren't sure if that's true or not. Um, Carlos's
Well, I
and
can.
Zoe's phones were eventually pinged. The information. What did the information tell the police, and what did you find out about it?
That her cell phone was pinged. And it was 1 mile radius of a certain area, and that would include Carlos's home.
And so, did you eventually find out that the text that she sent you, that text at 2:20 a.m., where she was asking if you needed picked up, was done in that radius? It was not, that text was not sent from Savannah's apartment. It was actually sent somewhere in the vicinity of where Carlos lives.
Correct. Within that 1 mile radius, yes.
Okay. And what about Carlos? Have you ever found anything about Carlos's phone? Is there any proof that he was out of the area, away from his house at that time? Have the police ever told you anything about any of that?
No, they have not told me anything about his cell phone or anything about his social media or anything like that. No.
And there was this place called that I saw in the disappeared episode, Lowry Field. Does that have a
Hmm.
significance to this case? Is that a location? What do the listeners need to know about that?
Lowry Field is a big football field where all the high schools go and play football. But the reason why that was brought up, Lowry Field, is because that field is just right across the street from where Carlos lived, and the tower that they're using for the cell phone ping is in that area. So um, they said Lowry Field only because that was the main, not the main, the something that uh, uh, like
A
something
landmark,
that people
maybe?
would notice.
Yeah, a
Yeah, like
landmark.
a landmark. Like people would notice and know that that was the area.
All right, because it was mentioned in the episode. I thought that might be able to give an idea if they're going to do any Google mapping or anything. That'll give them an idea. We're going to come back to Carlos in a little bit, but what was established with Carlos is that Zoe did go out that night. She did see this Carlos guy. We're not sure what happened. Looks suspicious, of course. But he did try to message her a couple times, claiming that she left and never came back. But we should be clear that it wasn't like he texted her. I think he Facebook messaged her instead. Am I right about that?
Hmm. I do believe so.
Okay.
I think there was maybe one on her phone, a couple of them, or where he tried calling or something to that effect. But some of the messages or phone calls were to her phone, her actual phone.
Okay. The reason I'm saying that is because I'm guessing that if he is trying to hide his location, if he did do something to Zoe, that messaging would be a way to contact her with while covering up where his location was. Whereas if you use texting, of course, it's going to bounce off a tower and give you a location. I'm not sure about all the technicalities of that, but that's something that did come to my mind when I was um, thinking about that. I'm sure people might know a little bit more about that than I do. We've mentioned Ben a couple times. He was mentioned in the disappeared episode as well. His name is Ben Flores. How do you know him? And we're going to get into why his name is significant and the role he might have played in all this. How do you know Ben? How long have you known him?
um, I met Ben when I worked at the bar. Uh, Beginning, he was, just a friend. He was the sweetest guy ever. Um, we eventually tried to work something out to become a couple. It didn't work. Uh, I think we tried for like 2 to 3 weeks, maybe a month. Um, Realized that it didn't work, but then there was a lot of times where we had a lot of cookout, and Ben came and he met my daughters, he met my grandkids. Um, we were all we just like would hang out, and eventually, when Zoe was attending school, um, because my car was in the shop, and this was right before she got her vehicle. Ben would let her go to school, or sometimes he would just drop her off and pick her up. I would ask him if he could do that, and he said yes. And he was just a friend, a friend to Zoe, a friend to myself.
Savannah,
Um,
too?
yeah, to Savannah, and he treated them with nothing but respect. Just things just didn't work for me and him, but we were still friends.
Okay. How long would you say that you knew him before Zoe disappeared?
Um, let's see. probably about a year.
All right, so
A year.
let's say late 2012. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, in fact, you saw Ben that night, that Sunday evening. You're at work. You're working at the bar. You actually saw him. He was there.
Yes, he was there. He was there drinking. I know I don't remember exactly what time he got there, but I know he left about I want to say about one between 1 and 1:30, 1:15, 1:20. He was pretty intoxicated. He
Okay.
left because I had said it was time for him to go.
Okay. So you're friends with him, and you're serving him, and at some point, as a friend, you kind of told him, Ben, I think you maybe have had enough.
Yeah, because
That
I knew he still had to drive home,
all right? He had
and
all
his
right. So
home from
maybe
the bar was
okay. So you might have
his
been
home.
drinking and driving that night, just to be honest.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yes, he that was
Okay.
him. His home from the bar was probably about 3 minutes. It was just across one, down the street and across one major street.
Okay. Now the reason we're talking about him, and this is the same Ben whose sweatshirt was in the back of Zoe's car.
Correct.
All right, and we just to remind the listeners, the story goes that once they talked to Jacob, Jacob claims that he had been wearing that sweatshirt, but he had gotten it from Ben.
Yes. Jacob and Ben, uh, they knew each other. They because of Zoe. Um, it's not like they wouldn't like hang out,
All
but
right.
times that Zoe would use Ben's car or Zoe or Ben would pick up Zoe. A lot of the times like Jacob was there, and so that's how they got to know each other. And I guess Ben was comfortable enough with Jacob to lend him or give him a sweatshirt. I don't know.
Okay. But somehow, one way or another, that sweatshirt was still in the car the night that Zoe disappeared, or it got put in afterwards, which is a totally other scenario. But the reason we're talking about him is that once the police got Zoe's phone records, there was actually a call between Zoe and Ben that night, and specifically not long after he left the bar where he saw you.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes. I found out from the detective that apparently there was a 20 to 30-minute phone call between Zoe and Ben. Um,
Who called who? Did he
Ben,
call her? Did she call him? Do you know?
I don't know who I don't know who called who.
Okay.
Um, I just know there was a phone call. I'm assuming that Zoe called him, but
You could.
I'm not 100% sure. I don't know.
Okay. Okay.
According to Ben, he doesn't remember any of the conversation. He doesn't even. He says that he doesn't remember Zoe calling him.
Is it possible that Ben might have drunk called her?
It's possible.
Okay.
According to what I'm piecing together bit by bit, or trying to make sense of everything. I think Zoe called him.
Okay. But he says he doesn't remember the phone call. Is he saying that because, and once again, you saw him that night. You would have seen him 15 minutes before this phone call was made. Is it your impression that he might have been so drunk that he wouldn't remember a half-hour phone call?
Yes, Ben was a type that once he reached his limit, it as soon as like he would walk outside or the air would hit him, it would hit him harder.
He
Like
would
it
get even
just
more drunker.
right.
Okay.
And not to mention that, he was doing other things other than drinking. So
He had some other addictions.
yes. So
Okay.
I just I just assumed everything just kind of everything hits him, and then he's over the top drunk.
Okay. Being that you knew him for a year before Zoe disappeared, had you ever had any conversations with him on the phone where he was drunk?
No,
No. All right.
no,
And in
I didn't
the
know.
year of knowing him, do you know of any other occasions where he had talked to you or one of your daughters? Once again, since he got to know them so well, in which he didn't remember the phone call later.
No,
No.
no,
Okay.
because I know Zoe would tell me, "Mom, I'm going to ask Ben if he can take me to school. Mom, can you ask Ben? Mom, or to that effect."
Okay. And we have to remind the listeners, Ben is in his 50s.
Yes,
All right. And Zoe
yes,
was 18 when she disappeared.
he's in his fifth. He's a veteran. He had bad knees. He was skinnier than Zoe. Short.
So there's phone call was made. Somebody, I mean, exists. We don't know who called who. The phone call is somewhere between 20 and 30 minutes long. I mean, I mean, these days, being that people text and everything, a 20 to 30-minute call is a long call these days in the
It
21st
Yes, it
century.
is. Mhm.
He claims he doesn't remember this, but you personally, you knowing your daughter the way you do, is there any reason you can think of that she would call Ben?
I think knowing now what I know,
Mm-hmm.
um, I think that she probably, because of the fact that um, in the bar, my cell phone wouldn't always ring. Um, Even though someone would call me, it wouldn't ring. I think maybe she called him to ask him if he was at the bar and if I was there. I think that's what started the conversation. I think that, or that's what initiated the phone call.
Okay.
Um, I think that she was trying to get a hold of me. Um, I think that she was in a situation where maybe she wasn't comfortable, and that even though he doesn't remember the conversation, I think she did it to probably how do I say it? She probably did it to let the person that she was with at the time know that someone knows where she's at.
Okay. Do you think that my impression, once again, just trying to look at this timeline, are you under the impression that she was in the company of Carlos while she was on the phone talking to Ben?
Yes,
All right, so Carlos was there and waiting while she was on the phone with Ben for a half hour.
that is what I believe. According to what I've been told, not just by detectives but also my daughter Savannah.
Mm-hmm.
I think that she maybe felt uncomfortable and was looking for a reason to leave, or trying to let someone know where she was.
Okay.
Like I said, I know earlier I had said that they had smoked and they had wanted to smoke again, and that Zoe was going to go get some more weed.
Mm-hmm.
She said she was going to go get it, but according to my daughter Savannah, they had just bought some, so Zoe had some. So there would be no reason why Zoe would need to go buy anymore.
All right.
So
All right,
that's what I'm
we're
just
gonna I think
thinking.
get back to that in a little bit as well. But you're just to maybe condense this. Maybe Zoe feels like she is in a bad situation. She's trying to figure out how to get out of it. She figures, well, being that I can't reach my mother, I can call Ben and maybe I can talk my way out of this situation by talking to Ben, and then I can get Carlos out of here. Something like that.
That's what I'm assuming.
Okay. But we do have to put this on the record. Ben was asked about that night and he took a polygraph test. Did he pass it?
Yes, he did take a polygraph test. He failed one question, and that was um, that question was, do you know what happened to Zoe?
What do you think about that, Melinda?
Um, it infuriates me. It does put doubt in my mind, in my head. I need to keep all all options open, but at the same time, I know this man, and I know maybe that's it's clouding my judgment. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, because it is my daughter. This is my baby girl.
Sure.
But at the same time, I know Zoe's Zoe's strength, and I know Ben's strength, and I just feel like if he did anything to her or tried to do anything to her, Zoe would have overpowered him. That's how strong she really, really was. And
Mm-hmm.
and Ben being in the state that he was, I don't think that he could have done anything. As to the reason why he failed it, I don't know. I know that Ben is an alcoholic. Ben is a smoker. He was he was in an interview for over 8 hours with no cigarette, no beer. I don't know if that has anything to affect the results. I don't know, and I don't know why he just failed this one question. I did talk to him. I As soon as I found out he failed that one question, I did confront him and ask him, and he swears he doesn't know why he failed it. He doesn't understand all this. He's telling me now. Am I completely ruling him out? No, no, never.
Okay.
But at the same time, like I don't think that that's what happened.
Okay. Okay. How long after Zoe disappeared did you find out that Ben and Zoe had had this conversation? Was it a week later? Was it a month later? Anything?
That
Just a
it was
guess.
probably
Months.
months
Okay.
later because I like I said that um I wasn't told a lot about her case at the beginning.
Okay. And in that time, being that I know that it sounded like you and Ben had tried to have a relationship, didn't work out. Seems like maybe he has an alcohol problem, maybe some other things that might have gotten in the way of your relationship. None of my business. In that time, did you ever talk to him about Zoe's disappearance?
Oh yes,
Okay. And not once did he
several
ever
times.
say that he talked to Zoe that night.
No, he just said he doesn't remember. He was, like I said, he said he went straight home, and he doesn't recall the phone call at all.
Okay. Does I have to once again because I'm in the position that I am, I have to ask these questions. Are you telling me that in those
Mhm.
months that he never looked at his phone bill and never saw that he had a conversation with Zoe that night?
I don't even know. I don't know if he would even look to see it.
Okay.
I know that once they, when they did bring him in for questioning, I know that they asked for permission to look through his phone records.
Okay. All right. Um, did he ever go out? I mean, did you do any searches? Did he ever come out? I mean, once again, I don't know how close you two ended up being, but did he go out and do any searches with you? I know you had some gatherings that were shown on the disappeared episode. Did he ever show up for any of those? Anything like that?
No, no.
Okay.
It wasn't too long after she disappeared that um, I pretty much stopped talking to a lot of people that um, were were at the bar.
Mm,
Ben was definitely one of them. As soon
okay.
as I found out he failed his test, we didn't have a lot of communication, hardly
Okay.
nothing.
If I can ask, when was the last time you actually talked to Ben?
I don't even remember.
Let's just put it this way. Has it been a while?
It's been a long time. Yes,
Okay.
it's probably within the first year that she went missing.
Okay. We're just gonna leave it at that. The listeners will make up their own minds. Who is, and this is a woman's name that came up in the disappeared episode as well. Kim Cruz. Who is she?
Um, from what I'm finding out about Kim Cruz is she worked at this motel that's called the Villa here in Lubbock. Um, well, actually, she didn't work. Her boyfriend was the maintenance guy there. Um, she was stating that she had seen Zoe there at the villa um, that night that she disappeared. Um, the villa is it's known for uh, drugs, prostitution. Um, it's just not a very decent motel.
And
Um,
to put it this way, you knew about this Villa Motel well before Zoe ever disappeared. It has like a reputation.
yes,
Okay.
yeah, I had heard about little parts, little bits here and there about the villa, like don't stay there, it's dirty, and stuff like that. And that did I know that people were doing what they were doing in there? No, that wasn't the kind of stuff that I guess I was so naive about it that it just never hit me. I just would always just knew don't stay at that hotel because of the dirty people that stay there. That's what I knew about it.
Okay.
Um, come later on to find out it was known for a lot of other things, and Kim had said she had seen Zoe at the villa the night that she had disappeared.
Hmm.
But from my understanding, uh, she had met Zoe prior to that, and only because, like I had mentioned earlier, Zoe was a big animal lover,
Mm.
and Jacob, for about a couple of days, or I believe a week, he had stayed at the villa with one of his cousins when him and Zoe were still talking. So Zoe was at the villa, like would go and see him at the villa. Um, that's when I believe she met Kim because, well, when I had talked to Kim at the beginning, Kim had said that she had met her because Zoe had asked about her dog. She had a pit
Mm.
bull, and Zoe was real big about pit bulls. She loved pit bulls, and she asked about the dog. Kim was walking the dog, and Zoe had seen it, and went to go pet it, and that's what I was told. Kim had said how she met Zoe.
Okay. So what you're saying is
Come
at
to
some
find
point,
out later, yeah,
please.
the story changes completely.
Okay. And what did the
That's
story change
when
to?
she had seen that's what she had seen. She had seen Zoe that night uh, at the villa. I believe it was between 1 and 2.
And did she say was Zoe with somebody or was she by herself?
Uh, I I think she said she was by herself,
Okay.
but from I know my private investigator talked to her. Um, Nothing could be like recorded or anything like that. Um, I don't know I don't honestly believe her credibility.
You don't believe that Kim Cruz saw your daughter Zoe at the Villa Motel the night that Zoe disappeared. You don't believe that.
I don't know. And according to my private investigator at the, that I did have, I don't think that she believed her either.
Because I have to tell you that the disappeared episode, once again, I know they cut things out. I know I have my own big complaints that my listeners know regarding disappeared and how they handle things. I got the impression that it was kind of the exact opposite, that you're a private investigator, and maybe we should talk about that a little bit, did believe Kim's sighting. That was my impression. Am I wrong about that?
I when I talked to Paula, my private investigator at the time, um, I was under the impression that she didn't believe her, that
Hmm.
she felt that Kim was a little, I don't want to be rude or ugly, but like delusional.
Okay.
That she wasn't in her right state.
Okay.
Apparently, she was in hiding or something from something along in her life. I don't know everything, but that
And it
everything
could be,
wasn't.
I mean, it could be something as simple that Kim saw Zoe there, but might have been back when Jacob was at the villa. Maybe that's what she was
That's
remembering.
what that's what I'm assuming. I'm thinking about that because I do remember Zoe had said that he was staying with his cousin at the villa and that she would go and see him. After Jacob, like I said, he was only there for a couple of days, maybe up to a week, maybe, and then he went back to where he was staying, and Zoe hadn't gone back since.
And we also have to remember that there is reward money out there for information leading to finding Zoe, and it could be that Kim could be motivated by that as well.
It could be, yes.
Yeah, that, and we always have to, and that's the problem with reward money, that it will bring people who like to tell stories out of the woodwork. I guess that on the other hand, we have, of course, proof that Zoe was on her phone between 1:30 and 2 o'clock in the morning, and of course that was with Ben. And Kim is saying she saw Zoe on the phone. So it kind of, there is the realm of possibility. Of
Possibility, yes.
course, a lot of young women are on the phone these days, so it's just hard to say.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, it's not that I'm completely ruling it out.
Mm-hmm.
I know Zoe, and I know her better than anyone, and I don't think that she would be there if she didn't have to be there in a place like that.
Let me ask you this. Being that, and we're going to talk about Carlos again here in a bit, a little bit more deeply. Is it possible that she saw Carlos and Carlos's story is true, that she said she was going to get more weed? Is it possible that the Villa Motel would be somewhere where Zoe might go to get more marijuana? Is that possible?
Um, for Zoe to go to the villa to get weed,
Yeah.
no, 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 not at all.
Okay. All right.
I can honestly say no.
All right, because it sounds like that would be the type of place where you might find something like that. But I
Oh,
don't know. I don't.
I'm sure it is. But
Okay.
like I said, Zoe knew who to go to already, and if she needed some, that would be the person to go to.
Okay. Um, and is the Villa Motel in the vicinity of the cell phone tower that Zoe's phone was pinging off of that night?
Yes.
It is. Okay. Let's move back to Carlos. Now the listeners should know you didn't even know about him, until well after Zoe disappeared. A few years, as a matter of fact. Is that right?
Yes, that is right. I had no idea about Carlos.
Essentially, you're out there trying to figure out what happened. Your family's out there trying to figure out what happened. Of course, Ben's name eventually comes up with the phone records and everything, but the police withheld Carlos's name from you.
Yes.
Okay.
Um
Well,
I I I didn't know anything about Carlos until probably like 2 to 3 years, 2 years maybe, and that was only that they had Facebooked each other. Now I didn't know anything about the April thing until the Disappeared aired,
is that right?
and then
Wow.
that's how that's how Carlos and Zoe met. I didn't know anything as to how they met or anything. I didn't even know Zoe had went to go see April until after Disappeared aired.
Not even your other daughter told you. Did Savannah know? Savannah surely had to know what Zoe did earlier that day. Not that it might be a
I
topic of conversation, but that seems weird that Savannah wouldn't even mention that to you.
I don't think that it was even brought up. I don't think that Zoe brought it up because uh she it was never mentioned to me through Savannah.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. Okay, I didn't know that. While we're on the topic, have you had a chance to talk to April about Carlos?
I actually talked to April probably like a few weeks ago.
Oh, is that right?
Maybe
Huh.
yeah, that just because like I'm saying, like I didn't even know Zoe had went to go see April. I didn't know any part of that. So I Facebooked her and asked her if she could call me, and
Mm-hmm.
she called me, and we talked for about 5 minutes maybe, and I asked her what happened the last time that she saw Zoe, and she gave me her story that Zoe showed up to see her baby, and that it was her and Zoe and Carlos in the same room. Uh, they were never alone. She said they did talk. Um, Zoe left, and Carlos left right behind her. And she said maybe that's when they exchanged numbers, or they said, "Hey, can I?" She didn't know because she said she wasn't
Okay,
down there.
that's fine. Uh, how did April even know Carlos? If Zoe's friends with April and Zoe didn't know Carlos, how did April know Carlos? Do you have any idea?
She said she knew him from uh, school, from high school. They were friends. They were acquaintances. So Carlos just happened to show up to see the baby, and happened to be right when Zoe was there too.
Did April ever, being that you didn't find out about Carlos for a couple years, you didn't know that Zoe was out somewhere that night? Those things were not, you didn't find out about these things till later. Um, did April know that Zoe and Carlos met that night?
Uh, she says, according to her, when I talked to her, she says that she didn't know that they had met that night. That the whole time that Zoe was there and that Carlos was there, they were never alone. April was always there. The only time is when Zoe left and walked to her car, and that she said Carlos had said, "Okay, well, I'm leaving too," and he walked
Okay. I
to
guess
his
I guess
vehicle.
I think I need to be a little more succinct about this. After Zoe's disappeared, did April ever talk to Carlos, and did Carlos ever tell April, Zoe was over at my house that night?
That I don't know.
Okay, that never came up when you talked to April.
No, my big thing when I talked to April was just to find out, like, how did Zoe meet him, and
Right.
what is his connection with you?
What have you found out about Carlos since you found out, his full name? The police finally revealed that to you. What have you found out about him?
Um, what I know about him is that he has been in trouble with the law. He currently, right now, is in prison. He's in jail, not prison, jail,
Mm-hmm.
for stalking a female. Um, from what my old detective told me, um, he's very, very explicit about sex on the phones that they record. I know that he's got two little boys, but I believe he's got domestic violence on his record as well with her.
Mm-hmm.
Um, basically, that's all I know about him right now.
Do you know if he's on any sex offender list or not?
No, not that I'm aware of. No,
Okay.
unless with this charge that he's waiting on, the
Okay.
stalker. I don't know if that carries, for him to do that. I don't know.
Okay. Did he have any problems with women, issues with women, any charges against him, any rumors about his behavior before he and Zoe met back in 2013?
That I know of, no. But
Okay.
like I said, I'm just honestly really just finding out about him.
Okay.
I don't get a lot of help from, you know,
Yeah. I know that,
so
and that yeah, police aren't as helpful as would like them to be. Do you think April knew or knows about Carlos's behavior? I guess where I'm going with this is, she has this guy friend who's over there that day. She's showing off her new baby and everything. Um, do you think that April would want one of her friends like Zoe to be friendly with this guy Carlos if this guy has not the greatest reputation? Has that ever come up in your mind?
oh, definitely. I often wonder whether or not she knows what kind of person he is, and why would she have introduced them, or anything. But her 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 thing is that she didn't know Zoe and Carlos were gonna talk,
Okay.
or that they were gonna get together later on that night. I know that when I did talk to her, she did tell me that the police, the detectives, have questioned her numerous times. Several of them were videotaped. So she said that, and the only reason I know that she told me that is because she says that, it really freaked her out, and
Right.
she's a young mother of two kids, so she was freaked out, scared,
Okay.
and I don't know if she's just I don't I like I said, I hadn't seen her or talked or even heard about her in years, so I don't know exactly what kind of person that she became or anything.
Okay. Just wondering. Um, the cops eventually, one of your detectives did take a dog over to Carlos's house. What did the dog smell?
Cadaver dogs picked up her scent in his front yard, inside the home, alongside the outside of his house, because I guess there's a walkway between the house and a fence, and also picked a person in the alley.
Well, and which would make sense being that Carlos admits that she's over there. But, and how
Hmm.
long was this after Zoe disappeared?
Um, 2 years,
Wow.
2.5 years. Yes,
I,
I didn't even know that cadaver dogs had went to the home.
okay.
Nobody ever told me that. It wasn't until the child advocate that I had was the one that uh she found out.
2.5 years later, a dog was able to still pick up Zoe's scent over there. That is
Well, I don't
interesting.
know like when that the dogs went to that home.
Oh,
I
okay.
didn't find out until 2.5 years later.
Okay.
Um,
I guess what I'm
like
asking
I said,
is, when do you believe the dogs were taken? Very shortly after Zoe disappeared, or a week later, a month later? No idea.
I have no idea. Like, I don't want to sound like a mother who's not interested in finding out
I
the facts or anything. It's just
The police don't tell you
uh,
much. The police don't.
they don't tell me. They don't tell me anything. And when if I do come across it, then that's when they admit to it.
Right.
If someone calls me, because I haven't gotten any in a while, but I still get people messaging me saying, look into this, and I
Yeah.
call my detective and he's like, oh, we already did that, whatever. Like, it needs to be also said that this is the third detective that I'm working with because they keep reassigning her case,
Yeah.
and I just think it's outrageous. It's frustrating.
I hear you, Melinda, and I hear it from many of the cases that I cover. And my listeners are very smart. They know the predicament, although they don't know how. I mean, some of my listeners are my former guests, so they know exactly how you feel. But of course, most of my listeners have never had something like this happen to them. But now that they've heard it so much, they know the reasons that you answer some of these questions the way you do. When you say, I don't know, the police don't tell me. My listeners, now maybe the people who watch Disappeared, maybe they don't understand. But my listeners, being that we do missing persons cases every week here, they understand exactly what you're saying. And I can tell you for sure they have total respect for you and they know that you're doing everything that you can. They understand that the police just aren't as helpful as you'd like them to be. They don't tell you much. You go through many different detectives. My listeners understand that, so I don't want you to feel bad that you can't answer some of these questions. Please do not feel bad about that. Okay?
Okay.
Okay. My listeners, I definitely understand, and I'm sure my listeners understand as well. Okay? There is no doubt in my mind that you personally, as a private citizen, you aren't part of the government. You're not a detective. You don't work for. You're not a police detective yourself. We understand you're doing everything that you can. Okay, and in fact, even having a private investigator who is out there, trying to dig up some things for you. All right. Um, we understand that the cops, they're under no obligation, unfortunately, tell me anything or the listeners anything or you anything regarding this.
Yeah, exactly.
And the problem is that I'm sure you've gotten the impression over the years that maybe they're not doing much.
Definitely, and
Yeah.
that they don't accept the help that comes their way. I've
Yeah.
actually I've 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 actually gone to different resources, asking if they will step into the case, uh, and with they're always so quick to say, okay, yes, but we have to talk because it's not their jurisdiction. They have to talk to the detective and they have to get their permission. And from what my understanding is all the detectives that I have, the two main ones, um, have denied the help.
You've also, not only all that, but you've also not been very pleased with how the police have portrayed Zoe in the media. Why don't you explain that?
No, the first um, press conference, I guess, that they had for Zoe, and this was probably a few weeks after she went missing. They expressed that they said that she would, she was basically she was putting herself in dangerous situations. So they portrayed her as pretty much a bad kid, and that she put herself in dangerous situations that may have led up to her being missing. And what they mean by that, what all this stems from, is just because she smoked weed.
Right. There is, to your knowledge, and even to the police's knowledge, there's not anything else that Zoe was doing that um, would have brought her into dangerous situations. Just as an example, she wasn't a prostitute or anything like that, meeting strange men somewhere. She wasn't doing that. That would be something where, of course, is very dangerous. Of course, Zoe was not doing that.
No, and she didn't have, um, according, later on when I find out from the detective, she had no affiliations with any gangs,
Mm,
um, nothing like that. It was just on her social media that she smoked weed.
that's about it.
She liked to smoke weed,
All right.
and she would put it on there.
It's not like she was selling it or distributing it or trafficking in it. She was just a user. She had no felonies on her record, no charges, anything like that.
No, no, never
No.
been in trouble with the law. Never. She was not selling it. She was not, distributing it or whatever. She wasn't trafficking it in, or bringing it in. No, she knew a person that would sell it to her, and she would buy what they call it, a dime bag. I guess it's like $10 worth, and that would last her like a week and a half, 2 weeks tops, and then she would go and get another one.
Once again, I mean, I can't deny that drugs do play a part in many of the disappearances I cover. But in this case, it is seems to me that the police did not treat her very fairly as to who she
No,
actually is. I think they
no,
really, really, really exaggerated um, Zoe and who she was. If not out just
exactly.
right lying about it.
I believe my first detective, he never once asked me who Zoe was.
Hmm.
Never wanted to find out who she was. All he was about was her social media, what she was saying on there. And then, of course, basically all he was saying was she was being, she's probably being sold. So
Hmm.
it was never, they just seems like they didn't take the time to ask me about who she was. It wasn't until I started having interviews with the media, news, and even then, a lot of it is edited. Not everything that I say comes out, and it's portions, and you can't really know her in about 8 minutes or whatever.
I
Even though the
realize that.
interview took 20, 30 minutes, they only air like 8 minutes of it. And don't get me wrong, I appreciate the media, I really do, because they keep her face out there. But I just wish that at the beginning everybody would have known who she really was. And at the beginning, I would have wished that my first detective would have taken the time to find out who she really was, and to really work on her case, and we probably would have found out her outcome, or found where she was, or anything. I believe if they would have worked it the way they should have, I believe we would have found her within the first few weeks.
Mm-hmm. A lot of families feel the same way you do, Melinda. That they don't like it when they talk to the media and things get edited. They don't like it when they talk to the police and police blow them off. I hear that a lot. It doesn't just happen in Lubbock, Texas. I've covered another disappearance in Lubbock, Texas, the disappearance of Jennifer Wilkerson. Her mother, Vicky, has a lot of the same complaints about the Lubbock Police Department that you have, than you do. But I live here in Florida. Happens here, happens in Pennsylvania, California. There's an overall very lax attitude in police departments toward missing persons cases. There's no denying it. It's an epidemic. Um, the good news is that this interview is now over 2 hours, and none of it is getting edited. It's going to play just as it has, so you don't have to worry. On Unfound, the interviews play exactly as they were recorded. Okay, so there's going to be
Thank
no
you.
editing. Every word that you've used is going to be heard by the listeners. Where does the case stand at this point? Let's put it this way: when was the last time you actually talked to somebody in the police department?
I actually called my detective um, a few days ago, uh, probably no more than a week ago. There was a tip through. Um, Someone called a tip line, and it was something that was created by my child advocate and my private investigator. And a tip came in recently. It was an anonymous caller. He indicated that he threw out a name, said that this person was currently in the Lubbock County Jail, and that this person was the one who ordered the abduction of Zoe. Is exactly what was pretty much said on the voicemail.
Ordered the abduction of. What does that mean?
Uh, I'm thinking he ordered for Zoe to get picked up, or for Zoe to get taken, or for something to happen to Zoe, is what I'm interpreting this.
Okay.
I did call my detective. I left a message. He called me back a few hours later, and I asked him, had he heard about the tip, and he said yes. One of the people that were one of the child advocates that I had forwarded it to him. He says it's not. He believes it's not anything because the name has never come up in her case, and that he's pretty much not going to look into it.
Okay.
I think
He
right
dismisses it as
now
just
they're
some
just,
rumor, just some talk, nothing serious.
yeah, yeah. So it's not anything that they're going to pursue. So they're just, that's where I stand right now. Like, I don't actually know if they're actually working on her case. I do know they did put together a file on her case against Carlos and sent it up to the DAs to see if they had enough evidence to charge Carlos. And it came back that there was not enough evidence to charge him with Zoe's disappearance.
Yeah.
Even after everything that has been put out there, I just feel like, other than her body or him making a confession, I don't know how much more evidence or what else they would need. I just think they're sitting and waiting to see if he's gonna actually confess. And in the meantime, birthdays go by, her anniversary is coming up, and it's just it. I've said it before. It's just frustrating.
Do you think that going back to this aunt that saw this guy run away from the car, is there a possibility that that could have been Carlos? I mean, did she get a description? I know he was wearing a hoodie with, the hood up over his head. Maybe he couldn't be seen. Would you say that Carlos would match the general description of the guy who parked the car and ran away?
I could say yes, but then that would. I mean, I don't know that that description fits any young kid.
Mm,
You know, um, I've only seen Carlos on Facebook pictures. So I don't really know what he looks like in person. I've seen one of his mug shots, so I don't really know exactly what he looks
okay.
like in person.
And where this apartment complex, where this car was eventually ditched, is that close to where Carlos lived?
No,
Not at
no,
all.
that was probably from his home to the apartment. It was probably a good 10 to 15 minutes, maybe,
All right.
if that.
Driving, that would be driving distance. It would be probably a lot longer
Right,
walking
right.
distance. So we have this guy that ran away, but just don't know if there'll ever be a description of him that is good enough. All we can say is that whoever ditched that car was able bodied enough to sprint away from it. So that would mean some sort of younger guy, teenager into his
Mhm.
20s, maybe 30s. Frankly, just to be honest, it would seem that maybe we could rule out Ben, being that he's in his 50s, as a guy who would be able to maybe, hustle away from a car like that. So maybe
Yeah,
that keeps
yeah,
him out of the picture. We just don't know. Um,
yeah.
how has this been for? I mean, I know it's been tough, but tell me about Zoe's dad and how Savannah has have reacted to this disappearance.
Um, Zoe's dad, pretty much. Um, he's military, so um, don't really see a lot of him. I know that when Savannah talks to him, like on her, like on talks to him about like maybe her birthday or her anniversary, like he kind of shuts down. Um, I know that his heart hurts. I know that it hurts for her, just like it does for myself and Savannah. Zoe and Savannah were pretty much inseparable. I mean, they were best friends and sisters, and it's been hard on her because a lot of times she feels like she's lost her best friend, and you know, uh, for myself, that's my baby girl. That's
Right?
that's my baby girl, and miss her every day.
Is there anywhere that the listeners can find more about Zoe? Of course, we know about the disappeared episode, and I will be linking to that. I have a place online where people can watch it in the lead up to this episode playing. But do you have like a Facebook page, anything like that, Belinda?
She does have her own missing Zoe Campos Facebook page. Um, there was also an episode on Crime Watch. Um, that's linked on her page as
Okay.
well. Um, I try to get back to people who message me on her page as soon as I can. Is there's still messages coming in from the show that aired on Disappeared that people are just barely seeing, like from South Africa or Italy. You
Right.
know,
Yeah.
uh, they're coming in, messages are coming in, and I try to respond as fast as I can. I just recently took over her page. I wasn't involved in her page. I had someone create it and also manage it, but here recently, I'm the one that's taking over and responding to messages as as fast as I can. Um, but
Okay.
her page is out there, and if anybody could share it, the more, the merrier. I mean, the better. To where her face will be out there more.
Any last words before we complete this interview, Melinda?
I just want to thank you, of course, for doing the interview. Also want to thank anybody that's going to listen to this. I know you have your viewers, your listeners, and I just want to thank them ahead of time and just let everybody know that I really appreciate everybody's prayers and thoughts and if they could just keep her face out there, and someone somewhere's got to know something, and I'm hoping that it'll happen soon, because this is just it's just really hard on us, and we miss her every day.
Melinda,
And
I can
we just
assure you that we're going to continue to keep in touch after this episode plays. All of my guests know that I like to keep in touch with them after. I try to help them in any way I can. We brainstorm new ideas. Sometimes they just need somebody to talk to. And so I want to tell you that this is just the beginning of us knowing each other, Melinda. All right, even though we've only known each other for about a month, and this episode is going to play, we're going to know each other for a very long time. Okay, I can assure you that, and I want to continue to help you try to find out what happened to your daughter Zoe. Okay.
thank you, thank
You're
you
welcome.
so much.
You're welcome, and I appreciate you being on this episode of Unfound.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And that was my interview with Melinda Campos, mother of Zoe Campos. I thank Melinda for joining me and all of you on the program. Zoe's case is the first one in Unfound's history where a victim called somebody she thought could help her, and the person doesn't remember the conversation. Not to mention that it doesn't seem like Ben could help her, because Zoe has been missing for 4.5 years. He didn't come to her rescue. He didn't call the cops. He didn't even go back to the bar and tell Melinda, hey, Zoe's in a bad situation. Because those are things he wouldn't forget at the time. Yes, maybe he might not remember them the next day, but even in a drunken haze, would somebody like Ben be able to do something right then at like 1:45 in the morning? This is a question I ask you drinkers out there. What do you think? Having said that, I have to admit that I had to think long and hard about this summation before I wrote it. Lots of possibilities and permutations regarding the time between 1:30 a.m. when Zoe called Ben and 2:20 a.m. when Zoe texted her mother. And yes, I do believe Zoe, not Carlos, sent that text. Those 50 minutes are the key to this disappearance. And it's kind of like the Bermuda Triangle of this case, where a phone call was lost. We don't really know the topic of that conversation between Ben and Zoe. And before I go into some of my insights, I want to say this. This could be the kind of case we've all heard of. Boy tries to do something to girl, girl resists, something bad happens. Could easily be the case. But I can't help but think there's more to it. And it's because of the call to Ben Flores. So regarding the call from Zoe to Ben, you can go two ways with trying to decipher what the content of the call was. On one hand, you can take Melinda's position that Zoe was stalling for time. She called Ben as a way to figure out what she was going to do next because Zoe was afraid of Carlos and Zoe thought she had gotten herself into a bad situation. Meaning Zoe called Ben for help. Totally plausible. and that Ben can't remember the conversation because he truly was drunk. Or maybe he even passed out after a couple minutes, and Zoe stayed on the line as a way to continue to stall for time, pretending to talk to Ben after he had passed out, but his phone continued to remain on. Once again, totally plausible. The issue, though, is this. Would Carlos really wait 30 minutes while Zoe talked on the phone? It's hard to imagine. We all know how we like it when we meet people, then they get on the phone with someone else. Even after just a few minutes, we're like, hey, that's rude. Well, Zoe talked for 30 minutes. Also, would Carlos not hear what Zoe was saying? Would he not realize she was fearful of him? And not to mention that if Zoe was truly worried, why didn't she just have Ben come get her? Or if he was that drunk, why didn't Zoe call Savannah or Jessica or 911? Why did she continue to stay on the phone with Ben in particular? It's hard to understand. The other possibility number 2, is that Zoe called Ben pretending that he was her marijuana hookup, that she was once again stalling for time, but in a different kind of way. To me, this is more plausible, because I could see Carlos being patient with Zoe being on the phone because he would think he was getting something out of it himself, even if the call takes a half hour. Yet, then we run into another problem. Would Carlos really do something to Zoe if he thought she was going out to bring weed back? I mean, if Zoe could lie for a half hour on the phone, then all she had to do was lie for a few more minutes to get away from Carlos. Moreover, she could have said, "Come with me, Carlos," then driven straight back to her apartment and locked herself inside, all the while pretending her own apartment was the place she bought weed. So we run into issues with the number 2 possibility of the content of the phone call as well. So each of the speculations about the phone call have their strong points and their weak points. But probably the biggest issue with this case is that Carlos, Kim Cruz, and Ben don't know each other, but their stories kind of mesh up. This is a situation that continues to bother me, and it goes something like this. Zoe and Carlos do run out of weed, just like Carlos told the police. Zoe calls Ben, and they try to figure out where she can get more. Carlos wouldn't get upset at that kind of phone call because he would benefit from it. Zoe gets in her car while she's talking to Ben. He directs her to the Villa Motel where she is seen by Kim Cruz. Remember, she says she saw Zoe on the phone. This would also explain why Carlos isn't upset, because he's not even there for part of the conversation with Ben. This would also back up what Carlos said about Zoe going to get weed. While Zoe is waiting for the transaction to take place, she texts her mother thinking, well, I'm going to be out of here in a couple minutes, and maybe on my way home, I could just pick my mother up on the way back to Carlos's. But something happens at the villa. This could also explain why Ben didn't pass the polygraph when asked if he knew what happened to Zoe. Not that he necessarily did anything to her, but he might have pointed her in a direction that put her into trouble at the motel. And it would also explain how a guy like Carlos, who lived at home, could hide a Lincoln for 3 days. How? Because he wasn't the guy who made Zoe disappear in the first place. Yep, I can't get that all out of my mind. With that, I'll leave the rest of the theorizing up to you. And that's the program. If you found it informative, please go to the app that you use to listen to Unfound and give this podcast a 5-star review. I thank you for listening. I'm Ed Densel, and you've been listening to Unfound.